Hey, everybody. It's great to see you all again. Now, it's me, Jose, and on behalf of everyone here at the Central Park Conservancy, I want to welcome you all on this week's walk. Now, today we're going to explore a landscape that some of us might be familiar with. In fact, we've actually done walks of this area several times before in the past. I'm talking, of course, about the Ramble, which is located in the middle of the park, roughly between 72nd Street and 79th Street. Of course, it was created as one of the original design features in Central Park way back in 1857. All right, so before we get started, now, of course, all participants are muted, but you can use the chat feature to say hello and comment. If you have any questions, you can use the Q&A, and my colleague Emily is going to be on the back end answering any inquiries and questions you folks might have. Now, closed captioning also has been enabled. You can turn them off by simply pressing the live transcript button down at the bottom of the screen and then pressing hide subtitles. Now, the images that you're going to see today, they were taken by myself on a very wet and rainy day last week. And you'll also see some historical photos. These were going to be taken from the New York Historical Society, as well as the Central Park Conservancy archive. Well, all right. And of course, as you all know, our official mission here at the Conservancy is to preserve and celebrate Central Park as a sanctuary from the pace and pressures of city life, enhancing the enjoyment and well-being of all. All right, so let's actually go ahead and take a look at our trusty map right here. And as you all can see, we're going to start off our walk on the east side of the park at 72nd Street. And then we're going to slowly make our way towards Loeb Boathouse. And then, of course, from there, we're going to explore the wooded Ramble and check out some pretty unique hidden secrets along the lakefront shoreline and find out why it's such a fascinating landscape. Then we're going to end off our walk over at Oak Ridge at the Ramble's northwestern end. All right, so we'll start off at 72nd Street and 5th Avenue, also called Inventor's Gate. Now, heading inside and making a right turn, we come down to this pathway as we bypass conservatory water on the right-hand side. Now, of course, you folks can actually see it right over here on the right. Now, we don't want to spend too much time in this particular area. We're here, of course, for the Ramble. And just making our way through the east side of the park, and we cross the main drive and we arrive at Loeb Boathouse, well known, of course, as a cafe and as a boating attraction for many visitors to the park. It's also going to serve as a gateway into the Ramble for today. Now, just right around the corner from the cafe, you can see this very nondescript trail leading into the woods. Even though this isn't really on the official map of the park, enough people actually use it that our crews have even put wood chips over it to protect the soil. And of course, greeting us into the woods today is this happy little squirrel, just kind of hanging out by this large rock. Now, these squirrels here in the Ramble are, of course, very much used to the presence of humans. As the park sees, of course, millions of visitors every single year. So they're, of course, all very well acquainted with the human habitats here in the park. All righty, and right up the road, we can see that the trail actually leads into one of the main gravel paths. So we actually make a left turn right here. We can actually follow it all the way to a nice little hidden secret area that some visitors might actually be surprised to know exists. So this part of the Ramble, this is going to be called the Point, and it basically juts southwards into the lake, giving folks this lovely, nice view. Of course, you can see the point right over here. It's just off to the north of Bethesda Terrace and Fountain. Now, here's what that view looks like today. So you can see pretty much Bethesda Terrace right across the water. One of the more amazing things about the design of the Ramble is that it really awards adventurous explorers with hidden vistas like this one. All righty, and let's turn back around and explore the woods just a little bit more. And right up the path, we can see a couple of unique looking trees. So why don't we go ahead and examine one of them real quick now. Right in the middle, this one is called the Hackberry Cream, which is actually pretty common here in the state of New York. They can pretty much grow in all kinds of conditions, and so they're a pretty hardy plant that can be found in many of the state's more natural forests. Now, hackberries have this very smooth gray bark that's sometimes covered with ridges. So this is actually a tree that's quite easy to spot in the winter or in the late springtime. Now, as we move up the trail, we come to this nearly dead tree by a lamppost. Miraculously enough, it's actually still clinging to life with only a few active branches. And right at the bottom of this tree, you can see just how hollow it really is. Every time I pass by this particular tree, whenever I'm walking around the Ramble, I always wonder how something like this can actually still hang on. Some trees here in the park are, of course, very, very hardy, and they definitely will not go down without a fight. All right, so why don't we go ahead and make a left turn right here at this intersection, and we're going to go ahead and continue exploring these nice, lovely woods. Now, walking around here in late March can be quite a real treat, since, of course, we're in between seasons. We have, of course, all the different birds passing through. And of course, some of the blooms are now just starting to open up. So right now, what we're looking at here, this is going to be forsythia. And they have these nice, lovely yellow flowers that really contrast with the bare winter landscape around it. And right nearby, we have this nice little surprise. Now, this is going to be a small, unmarked waterfall, kind of hidden and tucked away by the side of the trail. Now, it's been a rainy last few days here in New York City, so these streams and cascades here in the park have been especially active. All righty, and so we keep on walking. Again, right up ahead, here's another one of the Ramble surprise viewpoints, cleverly tucked away between trees and rocks. And speaking of rocks, right now we come to this strikingly large boulder just kind of sitting by the side of the water. This boulder, I think, really kind of enhances the more naturalistic character of this wooded area in the park. It really kind of makes you feel like you're taking a hike or a walk right through the Adirondacks. And of course, I think that was what the whole point of designing Central Park and the Ramble, as well as the other woodland, really were supposed to be like. It was really supposed to be this escape away from the hustle and the bustle of city life. Now, if we actually look below, we can see that the boulder is really carefully balanced on these much smaller rocks. It always kind of boggles my mind trying to imagine how these huge, massive boulders were first moved around when the park was still being constructed in the first place. Honestly, I think it must have been really quite an undertaking. All righty, and just up ahead, we can see one of the newer additions to this old wooded landscape. Now, this is one of the Central Park Conservancy's rustic wood benches. Now, through our Adopt a Bench program, each one of these benches can be personally endowed with a donation to help maintain the Ramble. Now, other major donations to the park have been funded, have even funded the creation of things like this boat landing, which was actually created just a few years back during restoration efforts around the lake itself. I really like this one a lot, simply because it's kind of like a nod to the old historic boat landings that were built here in the lake around the turn of the 19th and 20th century. All right, so let's take a look at our map again. And from here, we're going to head north, and we're going to explore some of the Ramble's, other shoreline. So in this case, we are going to be looking at the western shoreline of the Ramble. Now, this part, I think, has some really lovely views as well. There's even some rest points right by the main path, such as this one right here. That, of course, it's really quite nice to just sit around and relax and enjoy the view. Of course, the waterside views here of the Upper West Side really can be quite stunning. And we can see, of course, iconic landmark buildings like the Majestic over on the left. Right here at the center, you can barely see it, but that is, of course, the Dakota. And all the way to the right-hand side, we have the Twin Towers of the San Remo building. This, I think, is a very lovely and understated view that I'm really quite convinced that we're truly lucky to have as New Yorkers. All righty, and let's go ahead and continue on. Actually, right now, I want to go ahead and actually conduct our very first poll of the day. All right, so since, of course, we are exploring the Ramble this week, I do want to ask, do you have a favorite woodland in Central Park? Now, as many of you know, it's, Central Park has at least 3 different types of woodlands. And this kind of looks like a pretty straightforward question, But trust me, for some of us, it is a lot more difficult to choose a favorite, since we, of course, have so many fans of this very beloved park. I myself happen to be a big fan of the North Woods, just because it's so distinctive. All right, so it looks like most of you have voted. So let's go ahead now and see the results. And it looks like about 36% of you, a little bit more than a third, of course, are very much into the Ramble, closely followed by the option number 4, which of course basically means it's a little bit too hard to choose. Number 2 on the list is going to be the North Woods, closely followed by the Hallett Nature Sanctuary. All right, that I think is a pretty awesome. There are, of course, many different landscapes in the park, but the 3 woodlands, the Hallett, the North Woods, and the Ramble, there I think really kind of connects the whole entire park landscape. This whole Olmstedian idea of creating a natural landscape right in the middle of the big city. All right, so let's go ahead now and continue on with our walk. And from here, we're going to go ahead and actually examine this nice, lovely little tree. Now, the Ramble, of course, is defined by its many, many, many trees, most of which are going to be native to the state of New York. Now, this one that we're looking at, this is going to be a birch tree, and it's very noticeable even when there aren't any leaves on it, since it's got this really unique bark that essentially kind of peels like paper. And right across from the birch tree, we can find this lovely holly. American hollies are also another popular planting along this particular pathway. And you can see lots of them here especially, which of course they add quite a bit of green to this otherwise barren late winter landscape. Alrighty, so at this point on our walk through the Ramble, we now come to the Cascade. It's this arrangement of rocks along this steep slope, creating this very lovely waterfall for a stream known as the Gill. Like so many parts of the park, this area really benefited quite a bit from recent restoration efforts, which of course allowed for this cascade to be built up that flows much more smoothly and in a much more naturalistic fashion. The rock arrangement here too is also quite nice, because you can follow it all the way up to the top via this stone staircase. Now here's that water flowing down. Now hearing the rushing sound of the water on the rocks really can be quite therapeutic. And this spot is one of the more beloved and popular spots for folks here on the Ramble. Now, I think it's really quite hard to imagine all of this was pretty much crafted by hand and not by nature. All right, so from the Cascade, we are going to cross this small wooden bridge, and we're going to head up some steps. Now, that's going to lead us to this rustic bench along this outcrop of rock. Now, I would think it's definitely a nice, lovely spot to read a book here, or perhaps maybe enjoy lunch, especially when the weather is nice around. Now, back when the park was still under construction back in the 1860s, one of its very first statues was actually located right here in this exact spot. Now, this is going to be the bust of Friedrich Schiller, who is or was a poet that often wrote about nature and wildlife. So it's sitting here in the wooded Ramble area, right in the middle of the woods, I think was quite appropriate. This actually still stands today in the park today. So you can actually find the statue of Friedrich Schiller over at the Central Park Mall, which is going to be closer towards the band show. Alrighty, and continuing on now, every so often, especially here in the park's woodlands, you're going to encounter these dead logs. Now, while it may look like it's pretty unsightly, dead logs like these, they're actually one of the more important tricks that our crews use to maintain a healthy forest ecosystem. So basically, dead logs, they provide a habitat for bugs and other small mammals, and they also recycle nutrients back into the soil. This particular one that we're looking at, this is actually really quite massive, and it really was quite a treat just examining it up close and seeing all the nice tiny little bugs making their home inside. Alrighty, and let's go ahead and continue down the pathway. And over on our left, we have this really nice view of the cove and the water below. We're actually pretty high up at the moment, so these railings, they actually help keep us from falling down into the water below. Now, if we really look down below us, we can see these steps that are carved onto the rock itself. These steps actually take you to a hidden cave that at one point was open to the public, but nowadays is no longer officially accessible. Apparently, this hidden cave was actually host to a lot of very, very suspicious activity back in the early to mid 20th century. So park officials were essentially forced to keep people from entering it by blocking it off with all sorts of bricks and fencing and whatnot. Alrighty, and what we're gonna do now is we're gonna cross over the nearby stone bridge down towards the lower elevation of the Ramble. And as we can see right at the bottom of the hill, we get this view of the bridge that we were just on. So as you folks can see, this particular bridge, this is built up mostly out of Manhattan schist, which of course is the same type of rock that can be found all throughout Central Park. Now, I think it's little surprises like these that really add a sense of mystique to the Ramble. It's also a really nice experience just kind of crossing under it as well. Of course, as an area of the park that was meant to mimic the woodlands of the Adirondacks or the Catskill Mountains, you can find all sorts of mushrooms naturally growing here. So this, for example, this is one of the many species of bracket fungi thriving in these woods. Now, these are especially common on dead logs. This one, I think it's very representative of the circle of life, as mushrooms like these love feeding on dead and decaying trees. All right, so after a bit of walking, we've now finally arrived at our last stop of the day. Now, right now we're currently at the northwest corner of the Ramble, which is going to be anchored on this end by Oak Bridge, formerly on the side of the old Bank Rock Bridge. So Oak Bridge is actually one of the newer architectural features of the park. It's basically a reconstruction of a 19th century wooden bridge that once stood here. It was built just over a decade ago using more modern materials like steel and cast aluminum. Prior to this, the bridge that stood here was called Bank Rock Bridge. And it actually stood here essentially quietly decaying for years and years on end before the Conservancy undertook a major restoration efforts to this part of the lake. These days, the Oak Bridge now serves as the main entrance into the Ramble from the west side of the city. All right, so right now I want to go ahead and actually end off our walk today with this lovely view of the water as well as the nearby Upper West Side from here at Oak Bridge. I hope you've all enjoyed exploring this very intriguing landscape today. Now, while Central Park is often thought of as the heart of urban New York, woodlands like these really function as more of an escape away from city life. It's a naturalistic landscape that we as New Yorkers, I think, are really quite lucky to have at our doorstep. All right, everybody, and I want to thank you all for joining us on the walk. I also want to bring your attention to some of the other programs that we're going to be having over the next several weeks. So starting next weekend to celebrate the new spring season, we're going to bring back our Cherry Blossoms on the Reservoir Tour. So we do still have tickets available for some of these dates. So don't forget to check out our website for more information before they sell out. And yes, they are actually selling out quite quickly. Emily is going to be on the back end, and of course, she's going to be dropping the link for these tours in the chat section. And remember, be sure to check us out on all of our social media channels like Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can follow us at Central Park NYC. Now we're going to go ahead and leave the room open for any last final questions. But from all of us here at the Central Park Conservancy, stay safe and be well. Have a good day, folks.